Usually when we talk about getting a medical diagnosis, there's a very specific expectation of precision.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost mathematical.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It feels like engineering. You fall, you break your arm, you go to the hospital, and the X-ray shows that jagged white line on a black background.
Right. It's binary. The bone is either broken or it's not.
Exactly. It's clean. And
Yes.
psychologically, I think that's deeply comforting for us.
Yeah.
We like things to be visible. We like them to be categorized and, quantifiable.
We want to point at a screen and say, there is the problem.
Yes. But then you step into the world of macroeconomics. You step into the shoes of a central bank, and suddenly that pristine X-ray machine is it's completely useless.
It really is. You are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, quite honestly, incredibly murky.
Murky is the perfect word.
Yeah.
I was reading through our source material today, specifically focusing on how the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, handles its research, surveys, and data dissemination. And it just hit me how monumental their task is.
It's staggering when you actually look at the mechanics of it.
Right, because how do you take the pulse of a nation of over 1 billion people? How do you measure the exact flow of credit through millions of distinct businesses, or accurately gauge the inflation anxieties of households across dozens of different cities, all in real time?
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. Because to truly understand an economy of that scale, a central bank cannot just rely on a single static snapshot.
The X-ray just won't cut it.
Exactly. An X-ray is useless here.
Yeah.
What they essentially need is a continuous, multidimensional, real-time MRI of the entire financial system. And the hardest part, they have to build the machine while the patient is still moving.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
If you are listening to this, you are likely the learner prepping for a massive, comprehensive exam on central banking. So we are going to act as your instructional designers today.
We are going to build a highly detailed text-based blueprint for an infographic right in your mind.
Exactly. We are deconstructing Chapter 23 of the RBI source document so exhaustively that studying this deep dive will basically eliminate your need to reread the chapter. So let's start with Section 1 of our mental infographic, which is the core concept and title.
Let's hear it.
I'm calling it the data nervous system, how the RBI quantifies India. And here is your 2-sentence summary. The RBI's primary objectives of macroeconomic and financial stability rely on an incredibly complex, high-frequency stream of data, surveys, and research.
That's sentence 1.
Yep, and sentence 2. Chapter 23 details the exact mechanism, surveys, and mathematical indices the RBI uses to gather this intelligence and disseminate it to the public.
That perfectly sets the stage, but before we can even begin to understand all the modern databases, the APIs, and the acronyms they use today, we actually have to take a step back.
Right, the timeline.
Yes, the historical chronology, because the way they measure the economy today was born out of absolute necessity. Context is everything here.
Okay, let's unpack this. When does the timeline actually start?
The RBI has a surprisingly long tradition here. The anchor point for your timeline is July 1935.
Wait, 1935. That early?
Yeah, that is when the RBI first began compiling and disseminating monetary statistics, which was mere months after it formally commenced operations in April of 1935.
But, I mean, the Indian economy of 1935 was largely agrarian, right? It was under colonial rule.
Yeah.
It was vastly different from the highly complex, interconnected economy we see today.
Oh, completely. The metrics they used back then to measure quote-unquote money had to be incredibly rudimentary compared to what we use now.
So how did we get from there to here?
Well, the methodology didn't just sit still, it evolved in distinct phases. The source identifies 3 critical working groups that drove this evolution. First, you have the first working group on money supply, or the FWG.
FWG. And when was that?
That was established in 1961. This group was tasked with formally standardizing how monetary aggregates were actually compiled.
Let me stop you there just to make sure we're defining our key terminology for the learner. What exactly do you mean by monetary aggregate?
Good question. Essentially, it's the different ways you categorize money based on how liquid it is. So cash in your pocket is highly liquid.
You can spend it instantly.
Right, so that's one aggregate. But money locked in a 5-year fixed deposit is much less liquid. That's another aggregate. The 1961 FWG was about defining these buckets clearly for the Indian context.
Okay, makes sense. But then things changed.
Dramatically. The banking sector underwent massive structural changes, specifically the nationalization of major banks in 1969. That rapidly expanded the banking network into rural areas.
So the old buckets didn't quite capture the new reality.
Exactly. So in 1977, they constituted the second working group, the SWG, to refine the process even further.
Okay, so we have 1961 and 1977 on our timeline. But reading through the documents, everything seems to point toward the 1990s as the ultimate catalyst for change.
Oh, the 90s changed everything.
Right, because there was the 1991 balance of payments crisis. That forced India into a period of rapid liberalization, privatization, and globalization. I imagine the old frameworks from the 70s just started completely breaking down under the weight of foreign capital.
That is exactly what happened. The
Wow.
growing integration of the national economy with the broader global financial system meant that the RBI needed a far more sophisticated lens. The old ways of just looking at broad aggregates of money, it wasn't telling the whole story.
It was too simplistic.
Far too simplistic. That leads us to arguably the most important date and the most important figure in this historical evolution. Underline this for your exam. 1998.
1998, God.
In 1998, the RBI constituted the Working Group on Money Supply, Analytics and Methodology of Compilation, usually referred to as the WGMS. And this group was chaired by a very prominent figure, Dr. Y.V. Reddy.
Right, Dr. Y.V. already. Now, the WGMS under him is credited in the source with fundamentally changing how the RBI understood the economy by shifting toward a balance sheet framework. Can you translate that? What is a balance sheet framework?
Well, under a balance sheet framework, monetary statistics are drawn directly from the consolidated balance sheets of the entire banking sector, including postal authorities.
Okay, but how is that different from what they were doing before?
Before this, you might just look at isolated pools of money, say, just measuring how much currency is in circulation. But a balance sheet has two sides, right?
Assets and liabilities.
Exactly. By using this framework, you are mapping not just the amount of money, but the exact sources of money creation and the specific sectors that are absorbing that money.
Oh, I see. So it's the difference between looking at a lake and just measuring how much water is in it versus looking at the rivers flowing into it and the streams flowing out of it.
That's a brilliant way to visualize it, because in 1998, India was transitioning toward what is called a multiple indicator approach for its monetary policy. They realized they couldn't just look at money supply in a vacuum anymore.
They had to look at interest rates, credit growth.
Trade deficits, capital flows, all at the same time. The balance sheet framework was the essential underlying statistical plumbing required to make sense of a rapidly liberalizing financial environment. It allowed them to map cause and effect relationships.
Okay, so we've established the historical foundation. From the early days of 1935 through the working groups of 1961 and 1977, up to the critical shift to the balance sheet framework in 1998 under Dr. Y.V. Reddy. But all of this effort brings up a very basic question.
Which is?
Why do they publish so much of it? I mean, a hedge fund gathers massive amounts of data, but they keep it secret to maintain an edge. The RBI broadcasts its findings to the world. And from what the source states, this isn't just out of the goodness of their hearts.
No, not at all. They are legally mandated to do so. The statutory obligations are a massive part of the RBI's operational reality. The law physically forces the central bank to be transparent about its diagnosis.
So let's list these legal mandates for the study guide.
We can categorize them into three distinct areas. The first relates to monetary policy transparency.
This would be the Monetary Policy Committee, the MPC, where they decide on interest rates.
Correct. Under Section 45ZK, Section 45ZL, and Section 45ZM of the Reserve Bank of India Act, 1934, the RBI has strict legal obligations.
Okay, what do those sections demand?
They must publish the Comprehensive Monetary Policy Report. They must publish the resolutions adopted by the MPC. And crucially, they must publish the minutes of the MPC proceedings.
Wait, the minutes are the actual transcripts or summaries of the debates, right?
Yes, exactly.
Why is it a legal requirement to show the public the internal debates? If committee members disagree with each other, doesn't that make the central bank look uncertain?
It's actually quite the opposite. Showing the dissent and the varied viewpoints anchors market expectations.
How so?
If the market knows exactly why the committee chose to raise rates and they can see the data the committee was looking at, it prevents panic. Transparency breeds stability. It shows they're being analytical, not arbitrary.
That makes a lot of sense. What are the other legal mandates?
The second area is the overarching operational review. Under Section 532 of the RBI Act 1934, the bank is required to submit an annual report to the central government.
So that's the big one.
Yeah, it's an exhaustive document detailing the working and operations of the bank throughout the entire financial year. It's basically the ultimate accountability document.
And the third area.
The banking sector health check. Under Section 36(2) of the Banking Regulation Act 1949, the RBI must submit the report on trend and progress of banking in India. This covers everything: scheduled commercial banks, cooperative banks, and NBFCs.
NBFCs being non-banking financial companies.
Right.
So, if I'm playing devil's advocate here for a second,
Go for it.
the RBI is a massive institution, but resources are still finite. If they are legally forced to dedicate so much time, so many economists, and so much processing power to publishing these statutory reports just to satisfy the government and the legal codes, doesn't that limit their ability to do independent blue sky research? Are they just a giant compliance factory?
It's a very valid concern. But the answer is no. They are not just a compliance factory. Because they have intentionally built parallel structures designed specifically for independent, non-statutory research.
Like what?
Well, they disseminate research widely through the RBI Bulletin, their occasional paper series, and their working paper series. But the most interesting entity they created to solve this exact problem is the DRG.
The DRG. Let's add that to our important organizations list. What does it stand for?
The Development Research Group.
What makes the DRG different from the rest of the RBI's research departments?
The DRG operates as a bridge. It specifically fosters collaborative research between internal RBI staff and external experts, so professors, independent economists, researchers.
Okay, so bringing in outside perspectives.
Exactly. They publish studies that are meant for wider circulation, but the key distinction is that these studies are designed to generate constructive dialogue and debate on subjects of current interest.
Meaning they aren't official policy?
Exactly. The research produced under the DRG is free from the immediate constraints of official policy mandates. It allows the RBI to explore controversial or cutting-edge economic theories without the market panicking and thinking, oh no, the RBI is changing its policy tomorrow.
It's a pressure release valve for intellectual flexibility.
That's a perfect way to put it. So they satisfy their rigid statutory obligations under the RBI Act while simultaneously exploring the frontiers of economic thought through the DRG.
That dynamic is fascinating. It's like having a team of engineers keeping the plane flying, while a separate team in the back is sketching out designs for a hovercraft.
Yeah, precisely.
But let's go back to that third legal mandate you mentioned, the report on trend and progress of banking under Section 36(2). Because if the RBI legally must report on the intricate health of the entire banking sector, they can't just guess.
No, absolutely not.
They need a gargantuan physical infrastructure to collect granular data from thousands of local bank branches across the country. And this is where we dive into the deep end of Section 2 of our study guide, the Banking and Corporate Data Engine.
Get ready for some acronyms, because the sheer volume of data we are talking about here requires a highly sophisticated technological architecture. We have to navigate some heavy terminology.
Let's do it. What's the primary hub?
The primary hub where all this data eventually lives is the DBIE. That stands for the Database on Indian Economy.
DBIE. So how does someone actually interact with this database? Is it just like a giant spreadsheet you download?
It's much more dynamic than that. The DBIE is the centralized public portal. It acts as the single reference point where the RBI disseminates its statistics. But to make that massive amount of data usable, the portal uses a protocol called SDMX.
SDMX. Add that to the terminology list. Statistical data and metadata exchange. What does that protocol actually do?
Think of SDMX as a universal translator and a sophisticated filtering system. It provides the query functionality on the DBIE portal.
So it's how you search.
Right, because if you are an economist, you don't want a raw dump of all the data. You might only want to look at inflation rates, cross-referenced with rural wage growth over a very specific 5-year time frame. The SDMX protocol allows users to compare different dimensions and timeframes seamlessly.
Okay, so the DDIE is the library, and the SDMX is the highly advanced digital card catalog that fetches exactly what you need.
Yes, and it even lets you apply mathematical options, like calculating absolute changes directly within the portal.
But before the data gets to the library, the RBI has to track the physical entities generating that data. I mean, India is vast. How does the RBI even know where every single bank branch is located, especially as banks constantly open and close branches?
For that, they maintain a system called CISBI, the Central Information System for Banking Infrastructure.
CISBI.
Got it. This is a comprehensive, centralized database that serves as the master directory. It tracks every single bank branch, every administrative office, and every NAIO across the entire country. Non-administratively independent office, so things like a standalone ATM.
Ah, okay. And has this always been digital?
No, and that's a crucial point regarding their modernization. CISBI is the modern replacement for an incredibly old system called the Master Office File, or MOF.
MOF. When did that start?
That had been tracking this data since 1972. The upgrade to CISBI allowed for much faster updating and more accurate geographical mapping.
Okay, so CISBI tracks the physical infrastructure. Is there a database for the actual loans?
Yes, alongside CISBI, the RBI is also building out the CCIR, the Comprehensive Credit Information Repository.
CCIR. What's the specific goal there?
The CCIR is an ongoing phased initiative. The goal is to create a verified, centralized database of highly granular credit information. They want to track who is borrowing what and whether they are paying it back to bolster the overall credit culture and prevent systemic defaults.
Let's pull on that thread of granular credit information. Because when you mentioned the old MOS system starting in 1972, the source material highlights another massively important statistical system established in December 1972.
The BSR system.
Yes, the basic statistical return. I want to build a comparative matrix right here for the learner. Let's contrast the two main pillars of this system, BSR1 and BSR2.
The BSR system is the lifeblood of the RBI's banking data. It is how they see the money flowing through the veins of the economy. If we set these two pillars side by side in our matrix, it reveals a perfect mirror image.
Let's start with the left side of the matrix, BSR1.
On one side, we have BSR1. The core exclusive focus of BSR1 is credit. It tracks the outflow of money from the scheduled commercial banks into the economy.
Outflow, credit. Okay, and the right side.
On the other side, we have BSR2. The core focus of BSR2 is deposits. It tracks the inflow of money from the public back into the banking system.
Perfect. Let's dig into BSR1 first. If I am sitting at a desk at the RBI and I pull up the latest quarterly BSR1 release from the DBI e-portal, what exactly am I looking at? Am I just looking at a single number that says HDFC Bank loaned out 100 billion rupees this quarter?
Oh, it is infinitely more granular than that. Under BSR1, the RBI captures highly specific characteristics of almost every loan.
Like what?
They track the type of account, the organization type of the borrower. Most importantly, they track the borrower's exact occupation or industrial activity.
Wait, they track the specific occupation of the borrower?
Yes. They track the specific geographic district and the population group of that district. They log the exact interest rate being charged, the total credit limit approved, and the actual outstanding amount drawn down.
But why? Why does the Central Bank of India care if a borrower in a rural district of Maharashtra is a textile manufacturer or a sugarcane farmer? What does that level of micro detail actually change about macro policy?
It changes everything because it reveals systemic risk and sectoral blockages. Let's look at the cause and effect relationship here.
Okay, walk me through it.
Imagine the RBI spots a sudden, sharp decline in overall credit growth across the country. If they only had that single, broad number, they might panic. They might slash interest rates across the entire country to stimulate borrowing.
Which could cause massive inflation.
Exactly. But because they have BSR1, they can drill down. They might discover that credit growth is actually perfectly healthy in the technology sector, in housing, and in agriculture. The entire drop is isolated to textile manufacturers in 3 specific districts.
Because maybe those mills are facing a localized supply chain crisis and just stopped taking loans.
Precisely. So instead of a blind, sweeping policy change that might cause inflation everywhere else, they can perform a targeted intervention. BSR1 acts as a scalpel, not a sledgehammer.
That is brilliant. Okay, so that's the left side of our matrix. Outflow, credit, scalpel. Now look at the right side of the mirror. BSR2, the deposit inflow. What are the parameters there?
BSR2 provides detailed, branch-wise data on the money coming in. It categorizes the deposits by type. So are they current accounts, savings accounts, or term deposits?
Basic buckets.
Right. But it also tracks the institutional ownership of those deposits. And really interestingly, it tracks the age-wise distribution of individual depositors.
Age-wise, like they know if a 25-year-old is saving versus a 65-year-old.
Yes, because demographic savings patterns are crucial for long-term economic forecasting. BSR2 also tracks the exact maturity patterns of term deposits.
Why does the maturity pattern matter?
Because it shows expectations. If suddenly, millions of people start shifting from 5-year fixed deposits to 3-month fixed deposits. That tells the RBI that the public expects interest rates to rise soon and they don't want to lock their money away for long.
Oh, wow. It's like behavioral data hidden in banking forms.
Exactly. Interestingly, BSR2 also captures operational data, like the number of employees at these specific branches. And for your timeline notes, it's worth noting that before 2018, some of this deposit data was collected through a separate survey called BSR4, but it has since been streamlined into BSR2.
Okay, so BSR1 maps the credit going out, and BSR2 maps the deposits coming in. But if we think about the broader economy, banks are just the intermediaries, right?
Yeah.
They are the pipes.
Yes.
The water flowing through those pipes is driven by the corporate sector. Corporations are the ones taking out the massive loans, building the factories, driving economic activity. How does the RBI pull data from the private corporate sector to see what's actually happening on the ground?
Well, the RBI doesn't have direct regulatory authority over every private corporation, so they rely on a powerful data sharing ecosystem. Specifically, they work with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs and their MCA 21 system.
MCA 21. What does that system entail?
The MCA 21 system is the digital repository for corporate filings in India. For the RBI's analytical purposes, they focus on 2 mutually exclusive reporting platforms within MCA 21 to pull abridged financial results.
Let's break toes down.
The first platform uses XBRL, which stands for Extensible Business Reporting Language.
XBRL. I've heard of this in accounting circles. It basically tags financial data so machines can read it instantly, right? Instead of a human having to read a PDF and type the numbers into a spreadsheet, the software just knows that tag A is revenue and tag B is debt.
That's exactly right. It drastically reduces processing time and errors. Under the MCA 21 rules, all listed companies, as well as unlisted companies that meet a certain threshold of paid-up capital or turnover, are legally required to submit their complete annual accounts using this XBRL format.
So that's for the big players. What about the smaller ones?
The second platform is for the remaining universe of smaller companies that don't meet those thresholds. They submit limited financial data using a non-XBRL format known as Form AOC4.
AOC4.
Got it.
So the RBI sucks up all this corporate financial data, the XBRL data from the giants and the AOC4 data from the smaller players. What do they actually do with it?
They use it to predict the future of India's infrastructure.
How?
The RBI analyzes this corporate data to evaluate the investment intentions of the private sector. By looking at the ex-ante phasing,
Ex-ante meaning.
meaning the planned future phasing, they look at the planned phasing of large project proposals that are financed by banks, and from that, the RBI can forecast envisaged capital expenditure, or CapEx.
CapEx, meaning the money companies are planning to spend on hard assets.
Yeah.
New factories, new machinery, new software systems.
Exactly, and this forecasting is absolutely vital because the RBI's CapEx forecasts don't just stay inside the central bank. They directly feed into the national GDP estimates compiled by the NSO, the National Statistical Office.
That is a staggering data pipeline. Let me just trace that for a second. A local company files its financial returns using XBRL. That data flows into the ministry's MCA 21 system. The RBI extracts it, analyzes the company's intention to build a new warehouse, calculates the CapEx, and that analysis gets handed over to the NSO to help calculate the official gross domestic product of the entire country.
It is a deeply interconnected nervous system. Every node relies on the accuracy of the node before it.
But here is the massive limitation I see with everything we've discussed so far in Section 2. Whether it's the BSR1 credit returns from the banks or the XBRL balance sheets from the corporations, all of this is empirical data about the past.
Yes, it's historic.
It tells you what has happened. It's the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
But if you are the governor of the RBI, setting monetary policy is about steering the car forward. Driving while only looking in the rearview mirror is going to end in a catastrophic crash. You need to know what is going to happen tomorrow, next month, next year. How do they measure the future?
You've hit on the fundamental challenge of central banking. Hard data is lagged. To see through the windshield, the RBI relies on a sophisticated arsenal of forward-looking surveys.
Which brings us to Section 3 of our study guide, Surveying the Landscape.
Right. These surveys are designed to capture sentiment, expectations, and real-time operational bottlenecks before they show up in the official lagged data.
Let's walk through this survey arsenal. There are some vital statistics the learner needs to memorize here. Where do they start?
They start with the public. The most prominent survey is the IESH, the Inflation Expectations Survey of Households.
IESH. When did that start?
This was initiated in September 2005. The methodology is rigorous. It uses a two-stage probability sampling design, targeting exactly 6,100 households across 19 major cities in every single round.
Write that down. 6,100 households, 19 cities. What are they asking them?
They capture both qualitative and quantitative responses regarding expected price changes over two distinct horizons, a 3-month horizon and a 1-year horizon. They want to know if a regular household expects the price of food, housing, or services to go up, down, or stay the same.
Okay, I have to stop and push back on this heavily.
Why?
Because reading the source material, I also see a completely different survey called the SPF, the Survey of Professional Forecasters.
Yes. The SPF started in September 2007. It asks a panel of professional elite economic forecasters to provide annual and quarterly predictions on around 20 key macroeconomic indicators: growth, the external sector, and, crucially, inflation.
Right, so you have the SPF, which is full of PhD economists utilizing advanced algorithms, supercomputers, and real-time global commodity tracking to predict inflation.
Correct.
But on the other hand, you have the IESH, sending surveyors out to knock on the doors of 6,100 random households, homemakers, daily wage workers, retired individuals, asking them what they think the price of tomatoes will be in 3 months. Why? Why spend the resources surveying a random person on the street when you have the professionals? Aren't the professionals inherently more accurate?
This is perhaps the most profound concept in modern central banking, and it lies at the core of the flexible inflation targeting framework. You are asking why perception matters as much as mathematical reality.
Because a math model doesn't buy groceries.
Exactly. It comes down to the behavioral economics of inflation. We have to look at the psychological driver of inflation. Economic theory dictates that inflation expectations directly and immediately alter purchasing and negotiating behavior.
Walk me through a scenario. Let's do a cause and effect map for the learner. How does a thought turn into a price increase?
Okay, let's take a hypothetical software engineer in Bengaluru or a textile worker in Kanpur, someone surveyed in the IESH.
Okay.
Let's say the global price of oil is perfectly stable, and the professional forecasters in the SPF state that mathematically, inflation will remain flat at 4%.
So things should be fine.
Mathematically, yes. But due to a temporary localized shortage of onions, our worker goes to the market and sees vegetable prices spiking. Psychologically, they panic. They believe deeply that general inflation is about to surge to 8% or 10%.
Even though the models say it won't.
Right, because they expect high inflation. That is the cause. They alter their behavior today. That is the effect. The worker goes to their boss and says, everything is getting expensive. I need a 10% raise or I quit.
And if millions of workers do that simultaneously.
Exactly. The companies are forced to grant those wage increases to retain talent. But to protect their profit margins, the companies must then raise the prices of their goods and services. So the mere expectation of inflation caused wages to rise, which caused prices to rise, creating a self-fulfilling wage price spiral.
Wow.
Actual inflation hits 8%, even though the mathematical models said it shouldn't.
So it literally does not matter if the professional forecaster is mathematically correct about the current money supply. If the public believes prices are going up, they will act in a way that forces prices to go up.
Precisely. If the professionals say inflation is fine, but the public panics, the public's behavior will dictate the macroeconomic reality. The central bank must balance the elite financial models of the SPF with the actual lived reality and psychological sentiment of the IESH.
That is why the IESH sample includes specific quotas for homemakers, financial sector employees, self-employed workers, and daily wage earners across those 19 cities.
Exactly. The RBI's job isn't just to manage the money supply. Their job is to anchor the public's expectations.
That is incredible. The public's perception becomes the macroeconomic reality. It's like quantum physics, where observing the particle changes its behavior.
It really is.
So the IESH measures inflation sentiment. Do they measure general economic optimism as well?
Yes, through the CCS, the Consumer Confidence Survey. This was started later in 2010.
Same sample size.
Yes, it actually uses the exact same sample size and geographic distribution as the IESH, 6,100 households in 19 cities. But instead of just inflation, it captures consumer perceptions and expectations on the general economic situation, employment prospects, overall personal spending, and personal income.
Okay, so that's the consumer side. What about the business side? Does the RBI ask CEOs, how they're feeling.
They do. They have the IOS, the Industrial Outlook Survey. This is one of the older surveys, started back in 1998. It targets a panel of manufacturing companies to capture qualitative business sentiment for the current quarter and their expectations for the ensuing quarter.
But sentiment is just a feeling, right? I feel optimistic about my business. Is there a survey that bridges the gap between a CEO's feeling and actual hard, forward-looking operational data?
Yes, and it's a vital one. It's called OBCUS. OBICUS. The Order Books, Inventories, and Capacity Utilization Survey. This started in 2008.
How does OBCS go beyond feelings?
It collects actual quantitative data on the volume of new orders a manufacturing company has received, the amount of work in progress they have on the factory floor, their stockpiles of raw materials, and ultimately it estimates their capacity utilization, or CU.
Capacity utilization. Let's make sure that concept is crystal clear for the exam. Imagine a car factory. The factory is physically built to produce a maximum of 1,000 cars a month. If they're currently producing 700 cars a month, their capacity utilization is 70%.
Exactly. And tracking that CU percentage across the entire manufacturing sector is a massive leading indicator for the RBI.
Why?
Let's follow the logic again. Cause and effect. If average CU is low, say 60%, and demand suddenly spikes, companies don't need to take out loans to build new factories.
They just turn the lights on in the unused parts of their current factories and hire a few more workers.
Right. But if the OBCUS survey shows that average capacity utilization is running at 95% across the country, the economy is running red hot.
Because they physically can't produce more goods with their current setup?
Right. And if demand keeps rising when CU is at 95%, two things happen. First, companies realize they can't make more products, so they just raise the prices of the existing product.
That causes immediate inflation.
Yes. Second, they realize they need to build a new factory to meet demand, so they go to the bank to take out a massive loan for capital expenditure. This drives up credit demand.
So by tracking OBCUS, the RBI gets advance warning of both impending inflation and impending credit demand long before the actual data hits the BSR returns.
That is exactly how it works. It's like tracking the RPMs on a car engine before the engine overheats.
Are there any other major surveys to list?
The final major one to note is the BLS, the Bank Lending Survey. It used to be called the Credit Conditions Survey. Instead of asking the borrowers, this survey asks the lenders. It targets the senior officers in the credit departments of the top 30 scheduled commercial banks.
Only the top 30. Why not all the banks?
Because the Indian banking sector is highly concentrated. Surveying just those top 30 banks gives the RBI a read on more than 90% of the total outstanding credit in the entire country.
Oh, wow. So it's a highly efficient sample.
Very. It's a quick way to gauge whether banks are planning to tighten or loosen their lending standards in the coming months.
Okay, so let's take a breath and look at what we've accumulated. The RBI has the BSR1 and BSR2 returns telling them exactly where credit and deposits are flowing today. They have the XPRO corporate filings telling them about capital expenditure. They have the IESH telling them that households are terrified of inflation. They have OBCUS telling them that factories are running at 95% capacity.
It's a mountain of data.
Exactly. And you cannot just walk into the Monetary Policy Committee meeting and dump 1,000 spreadsheets of raw survey data onto the table. It's too much noise. You have to synthesize it. The data must be converted into standardized mathematical indices so policymakers can track clean trend lines over time. Which brings us to Section 4, formulating indices and tracking the external sector. Let's talk about how the RBI formulates these indices, starting with a sector that drives massive amounts of wealth and debt, real estate.
Real estate is notoriously difficult to track because every house is unique. But the RBI compiles a standardized metric called the HPI, the House Price Index. They release this on a quarterly basis.
What are the parameters for the HPI?
There are three critical parameters regarding the HPI that you need for your notes. First, the base year used for comparison is 2010-11, which is set to an index value of 100.
2010-11 equals 100. Got it.
Second, it tracks official transaction data from housing registration authorities in exactly 10 major cities: Ahmedabad, Bengaluru, Chennai, Delhi, Jaipur, Kanpur, Kochi, Kolkata, Lucknow, and Mumbai.
And the third parameter?
The third and most mathematically significant parameter is that the HPI uses the Laspers price index formula.
The Laspers formula. Yeah, this is a concept that often trips people up on exams because the math sounds intimidating. But the underlying logic is incredibly intuitive. Let me try an analogy to explain how Laspers actually works, and you tell me if I have this right.
Please do.
Imagine you go to the grocery store in the base year, let's say 2010. You take a shopping cart and you put a very specific fixed mix of items into it. You put in 1 loaf of white bread, 1 gallon of whole milk, and 1 dozen brown eggs. The cashier rings it up and it costs $10.
Okay, I'm with you.
The Lasber's formula takes that exact cart and freezes it in time. It freezes the quantities and the specific types of items based entirely on that base year of 2010.
Right.
Now fast forward to today, 2026, and go back to the store. The Lasber's formula demands that you build the exact same cart. 1 loaf of white bread, 1 gallon of whole milk, 1 dozen brown eggs. You are only measuring how the price of that frozen historical cart has changed.
Right.
Crucially, the formula forces you to ignore consumer behavior changes. It ignores the fact that in 2026, maybe everyone stopped drinking whole milk and switched to almond milk. It ignores the fact that people are buying fewer eggs because of a new diet trend. Lasber's doesn't care. It measures the old basket at new prices.
That is a flawless analogy. By freezing the basket, the Lasber's formula isolates pure price movement and eliminates the noise of compositional shifts in the market.
So how does that apply to the house price index? They aren't putting houses in a shopping cart.
No, but they are freezing a basket of housing characteristics. In 2010-11, people in those 10 cities bought a specific mix of houses. A certain percentage were 2-bedroom apartments in the suburbs, a certain percentage were 3-bedroom houses in the city center, etc.
So the HPI freezes that 2010-11 mix.
Exactly. When they calculate the index today, they are asking, how much would that exact same mix of houses cost at today's prices? It prevents the data from being skewed if, for example, suddenly everyone starts buying luxury penthouses, which would artificially drag the average price up even if regular housing prices remain flat.
That makes perfect sense. Are there other complex indices they compile?
Yes. Another significant one is the BKSPI, the Banking Services Price Index. This is currently classified as an experimental index. Its base year is set much more recently, at 2017-18.
How do you measure the price of banking, though?
It's tricky. So the BKSPI divides banking services into 2 distinct categories to capture the true cost. The first category is direct services.
Direct services would be the obvious stuff, right? Explicit charges, the fee for a demand draft, AZM withdrawal charges, brokerage commissions.
Exactly. It's a line item on your statement. But the second category is where the real complexity lies. It is called FISIM, F-I-S-I-M, which stands for Financial Intermediation Services Indirectly Measured.
Financial intermediation services indirectly measured. FISIM. What is the indirect measurement happening there?
Think about how a bank makes its core profit. If a bank pays depositors 4% interest on their savings accounts, but charges borrowers 8% interest on their loans, that 4% difference.
The spread or the margin?
Right, that margin is the bank's compensation for the service of intermediation. They are providing the service of connecting the saver with the borrower and absorbing the default risk.
So there is no explicit line item that says intermediation fee. The fee is invisibly baked into the interest rate spread.
Precisely. FISIM attempts to isolate and measure the value of that invisible service margin. By combining the explicit direct services with the implicit FISIM, the BKSPI gives the RBI a comprehensive picture of how much friction exists in the banking sector, how much the banks are charging the economy to move money around.
Okay, up to this point, we have built a massive architecture, but it has been entirely domestic. We've looked at Indian banks, Indian corporations, Indian households, and Indian real estate.
But India doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Exactly. It is a massive player, deeply integrated into the global economy. Trillions of rupees flow across its borders via trade, foreign direct investment, remittances, and tourism. If the RBI only looks inward, they are missing half the picture. How does the RBI quantify the external sector?
Tracking cross-border flows requires adherence to strict global standards. You want to ensure that India's data is compatible with the rest of the world. The foundational manual you need to know here is BPM-6.
BPM-6. What does that stand for?
It is the International Monetary Fund's Balance of Payments and International Investment Position Manual, 6th edition. This is the global gold standard for external accounting.
And the RBI follows this.
Strictly. The RBI mandates that all of its external reporting must align with the methodological guidelines set out in BPM-6.
So BPM-6 is the rulebook. What is the actual mechanism? What is the software catching the data?
The primary data capture mechanism is a web-based system called FETRS, F-E-T-E-R-S, the Foreign Exchange Transactions Electronic Reporting System.
FETRS. How does it work?
Under the law, any entity facilitating foreign exchange, so banks, money changers, are designated as authorized dealers. FEDRS collects the purpose-wise details of all foreign exchange sale and purchase transactions from these authorized dealers.
Purpose-wise, meaning it tells the RBI not just that money left the country, but why it left the country. Was it for importing software? Was it a student paying tuition in London?
Exactly. But the nature of cross-border transactions has changed radically, hasn't it? It's not just big corporations doing wire transfers anymore.
No, individuals are constantly making microtransactions across borders using digital payments.
Yeah.
How does FEDRS handle that volume?
That was a huge challenge, which is why FEDRS was recently upgraded. It now captures the MCC, or Merchant Category Code.
Merchant category code? Like the code a credit card company uses to know if I'm buying gas or groceries.
Exactly. When you travel abroad and use an international credit card, or more recently, your UPI app, the Unified Payments Interface, that transaction is instantly tagged with a specific MCC. One code designates a restaurant, another designates a hotel, another designates a retail store.
Let's trace that. Let's say I travel to Paris. I go to a cafe near the Louvre, I have a coffee, and I scan a QR code to pay using my Indian UPI app. What happens behind the scenes in the RBI's data nervous system?
The moment that payment clears, the transaction is tagged with the MCC for eating places and restaurants. Your bank in India, acting as the authorized dealer, electronically feeds that specific transaction detail into the FEDRS system.
Along with millions of other transactions happening that exact second.
Exactly. FEDRS aggregates those millions of microtransactions, reads the MCCs, categorizes them according to the rules in the BPM6 manual, and funnels that aggregated data directly into India's official balance of payment statistics.
That is wild. So my single cup of coffee in Paris becomes a categorized statistical data point that helps the RBI calculate India's exact trade deficit in real time.
That is mind-boggling scale, right? And what about foreign companies investing directly into India, building factories, buying stakes in Indian startups?
Right. How do they track that?
For that, they use a different portal called FLAIR, the Foreign Liabilities and Assets Information Reporting Portal. This collects standardized financial parameters from Indian companies regarding foreign direct investment, or FDI.
Does FLAIR align with global standards too?
Yes, it specifically aligns with the IMF's Coordinated Direct Investment Survey, or CDIS. This ensures that India's tracking of foreign ownership is transparent and globally comparable.
Which acts as a perfect bridge to Section 5, the final major theme of our deep dive today, the cutting edge. We've talked about the history, the plumbing, the surveys, and the global integration. But if you look at traditional tools, the IESH takes time to physically survey 6,100 people.
It takes weeks.
The BSR1 returns take time for banks to compile and submit quarterly. Even parsing XBRL corporate filings takes a degree of processing time. We are moving into an era of artificial intelligence and high-frequency trading where a week's delay in data can mean missing a crisis entirely.
You're absolutely right.
How is the RBI preparing for a real-time digital future where they don't have to wait for forms to settle?
The RBI is aggressively modernizing to close that time gap. They are moving into the realm of nowcasting.
Nowcasting. I love that term. Estimating current economic conditions instantly.
Exactly, using alternative data. Let's look at the experimental sources they are currently utilizing. The first one addresses a massive pain point for India: food inflation. They have developed the OMFPI, the Organized Market Food Price Index.
How is the OMFPI different from the regular consumer price index that tracks food?
The traditional CPI requires surveyors to go to physical markets and record prices, which creates a lag. The official retail inflation numbers are released weeks after the fact. The OMFPI bypasses this by scraping alternative data.
Scraping what kind of data?
Prices from e-commerce grocery platforms, organized retail chains, digital supply chain trackers.
Web scraping. So they have algorithms constantly pulling the price of tomatoes and rice off delivery apps.
Exactly. It provides the RBI with advanced, high-frequency daily information on consumer food and beverage costs before the official lagging indicators are published.
That gives them a massive head start on identifying inflation spikes. What else are they scraping?
The labor market. The RBI is now actively analyzing job portals. They scrape unstructured online job posting data.
Wait, like LinkedIn or Indeed?
Yes, major employment portals. They analyze the postings for both high-skilled, white-collar jobs and low-skilled, blue-collar jobs. By tracking the volume of job postings, the specific skills being demanded, and the salary ranges being offered, they can produce real-time statistics on labor market tightness and wage trends.
But online job portals are notoriously messy. You have ghost jobs postings that aren't real, just companies collecting resumes. You have duplicate postings. You have vague salary bands. How does the RBI separate the signal from the massive amount of noise in unstructured web data?
That is the exact problem they had to solve, and it's why they established the DSL, the Data Science Lab.
The data science lab. This isn't just traditional statisticians with spreadsheets anymore.
No, this is advanced computer science. The DSL was created specifically to harness big data analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. They build the algorithms that can clean the scraped job portal data, identify the duplicates, and extract meaningful trends.
That's incredible.
And it goes further. The DSL conducts media sentiment analysis. They use natural language processing to read thousands of news articles, financial reports, and social media trends simultaneously to gauge the mood of the market in real time. They are looking for early whispers of panic or irrational exuberance.
To support all of this computationally, they must need massive servers.
They are establishing the GDAL, the Granular Data Access Lab.
GDL. What is the function of the Access Lab?
GDAL is being built under the RBI's new CIMS infrastructure, the Centralized Information Management System. Its purpose is to provide researchers and data scientists with seamless, secure access to micro-level, raw data.
So it's a sandbox.
Exactly. If an economist wants to run a complex machine learning model against 10 years of daily UPI transaction data, the GDAL provides the environment to do that without crashing the bank's core systems.
So they are essentially listening to the digital heartbeat of the Indian economy in real time. But as we discussed earlier with fitters, India is connected to the world. A perfectly healthy Indian economy can still be devastated by a shock originating in New York or London. Is the RBI hoarding all this advanced data, or are they coordinating globally?
Global coordination is the final, non-negotiable piece of the puzzle. The RBI is deeply involved in international data sharing initiatives. At a regional level, the RBI hosts the SFDB, the SARC Finance Database.
Who accesses that?
This is hosted directly on the DBIE portal, and it acts as a central repository for South Asia. It tracks exactly 136 socioeconomic and trade variables for member nations.
136 variables across South Asia. That builds a regional safety net. What about the global stage?
On the global stage, the RBI actively coordinates to fulfill the G20 Data Gaps initiatives, known as the DGI. They work in tandem with the SSB, the Financial Stability Board, the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, and the IMF.
The G20 Data Gaps Initiative, that phrase data gaps, implies a specific failure. Why the intense coordinated focus by the G20 on filling these gaps?
To understand the DGI, we have to look back at the trauma of the 2008 global financial crisis. The GFC wasn't just a failure of regulation, it was fundamentally a failure of data.
Right.
It revealed massive, catastrophic data gaps worldwide.
In what way? The big banks in 2008 had plenty of data.
They had data on their traditional operations, yes, but there were massive blind spots in the shadow banking sector. Central banks and regulators literally could not see the risk building up. They couldn't track the complex, off-balance sheet derivatives.
So the risk was hidden.
Yes. And more importantly, they couldn't see the cross-border exposures. If a bank in Germany held toxic assets originated by a broker in Florida, the data wasn't standardized, and it wasn't being shared between the US and European regulators. The bomb was ticking, but the wiring was invisible.
So everyone was looking at their own little piece of the puzzle, and no one saw the cliff they were all driving towards.
Exactly. The RBI's modernization efforts today, building the GDAL to process microdata, utilizing the Data Science Lab, and aggressively participating in the G20 DGI, is a direct, structural response to the lessons of 2008.
It's preventative.
Absolutely. The goal of the DGI is to ensure that all G20 nations are collecting and sharing standardized data on shadow banking, cross-border flows, and systemic vulnerabilities. The ultimate objective is to ensure that a systemic global shock never goes undetected again, simply due to a lack of shared granular data.
That is a powerful place to synthesize everything we've explored today. We started with a medical analogy, looking for an X-ray of the economy. What we found is that the RBI has spent nearly a century building an incredibly complex, evolving MRI machine.
A very apt metaphor.
If you are the learner studying this, let's recap your blueprint. We traced its origins from the early working groups to the pivotal 1998 WGMS chaired by Dr. Y.V. Reddy, which installed the crucial balance sheet framework.
Right.
We looked at the legal pressures, the statutory obligations under the RBI Act and the Banking Regulation Act that force transparency, balanced by the independent intellectual freedom of the DRG.
Which is key for exam prep.
We explored the intricate plumbing of the banking system, the DBIE portal, the SDMX protocols, the CSBI mapping of branches, and the critical comparative matrix of BSR1 credit outflows versus BSR2 deposit inflows.
And we saw how MCA 21 and XBRL filings pull the curtain back on corporate capital expenditure.
Then we navigated the fascinating behavioral economics of forward-looking surveys. We contrasted the elite professional models of the SPF with the vital psychological pulse check of the 6,100 households in the IESH and the CCS, proving that public expectation can literally create economic reality.
Yes, the wage price spiral.
We watched how the mathematical rigor of the Lesper's formula anchors the house price index and how the invisible margins of FOSM are tracked in the BKSPI. We followed a digital coffee purchase in Paris through the MCC and FEDER systems directly into the global BPM6 standards of the balance of payments.
And finally, we arrived at the frontier, scraping job portals, the Organized Market Food Price Index, the Data Science Lab, and the vital global safety net of the G20 Data Gaps Initiative.
It is a staggering operational achievement. The sheer breadth of Chapter 23 highlights that a central bank is just as much a massive data processing technology company as it is a monetary authority.
It really is. And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to ponder as you digest this deep dive and prepare for your exam.
What's the thought?
We just spent significant time discussing the future, how the RBI's Data Science Lab is leveraging AI, machine learning, and scraping alternative data to nowcast the economy. They are reading online job postings, tracking food delivery apps, and analyzing natural language sentiment across the media.
Yeah, the digital heartbeat.
Exactly. At what point does that digital infrastructure become so overwhelmingly precise that the traditional methods become obsolete? At what point does sending physical surveyors out to knock on the doors of 6,100 households in 19 cities seem quaint?
Wow, that's a good point.
Will the future of central banking rely entirely on analyzing the invisible digital exhaust of our daily lives, our UPI transactions, our search histories, our geospatial mobility data, rather than actually asking us how we feel? And if they stop asking us and only watch our digital shadows, will that economic MRI finally be perfect? Or will it lose the human element that drives the whole system?
That is deeply fascinating to think about. Keep exploring the invisible data that shapes your daily financial reality. Good luck on the exam, learner. We are signing off on this deep dive.